All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Wednesday, October 16th. So real quick, everything in the video is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. And we'll start off with Netflix, the big, one of the big earnings reports that people have been waiting for. So what does this tell me, right? I mean, if you look at the Netflix numbers, right? Here's a bunch of notes that Bloomberg's been putting, kind of going through. It looks like they beat on the earnings side, but it looks like the subscriber numbers, right? It's always about expectations. So the subscriber numbers fall short. Their forecast was 7.6, right? So why isn't the stock getting hit? And it's funny because that was the initial reaction. Looks like it traded all the way down to 265 before bouncing. Was flat for a little while and is right around the implied move. They were implying about a 10% move. I think it was actually like about a 10.7% move. The market makers, again, always a good way of knowing what the expected move is for a name on earnings, is basically looking at the implied move in options, adding up the at the money calls and the puts of nearest to maturity. So in this case, the October options, adding the premium up both on the call side and the put side, and then dividing by the price of the stock. And if you do that math, you would figure out that the implied move was about 10.7%. So we're right around there. But so what is this telling me? And same thing with a couple names from yesterday. Some of the bank names, J.P. Morgan. Even Goldman Sachs rebounded, yesterday. Bank of America, a few other names, right? It's kind of telling me that, being that I think everybody's kind of really tuned into those Netflix numbers, the subscriber numbers for Netflix, and the fact that they're up 10% on a miss in subscriber numbers kind of tells you that the expectations are pretty low for this earnings. Now, we're only in the first part of this, and every name's a little bit different. Some names, are a little bit different. Like Abbott, I was surprised sold off. I mean, their expectations were they narrowed their expectations, which were not better than expectations. But I think for the most part, there's a lot of money that is on the sidelines, and expectations are pretty low going into this. So, we are seeing some positioning in earnings names. It's always very difficult to read when we see, a decent call buyer. Like we did see some Netflix, some interesting like calendar spreads that went up, which we talked about in the room a little bit. But this was, let's see if I can find it. It was like the October December that were going up. I think this was it. October, and then the December 345 call. So I don't know. It's kind of usually when you do a calendar spread, you usually sell the closest to the maturity ones and buy the further out one. But this one, they may have bought the 302 and then used the December 345s to hedge against. I'm guessing that's what they did there, because one went up on the bid, one went up on the ask. But they did this trade a couple times, twice. And they did this late in the day, so an interesting way to put on an earnings trade for this one. But we are seeing, we saw this a couple days ago. We went through some of the option activity and charts in yesterday's member chart forum, so there was no video yesterday, but we went over a lot of that and what's kind of on the tape. But so my view, I'm always happy to kind of give that. Whether right or wrong. Like I even advertised my trade that I did for Netflix, which I was not expecting a big move. So we'll see how this shakes out. I'm short the 310, 315 call spread. So if it stays here, I'm okay. Of course, what I can do, and then I'm also short the all the way down. I'm short the 262, 257 and a half put spread, right? You do this trade, you sell premium when you think the implied move is a little bit more than you think the stock's going to move. So right around here, I'm safe. What I can do, right? People always neglect, when they put on one of these earnings trades or anything with options. Like if I wanted to hedge myself out a little bit, what I could do is buy stock here in the aftermarket, right? There's always some things that you could do to kind of protect yourself, being that I'm not in any harm's way right now. But of course, for Monday, if this thing rallies more, then what happens is I would negate the gains on my earnings trade. So the safe thing to do here, and I might do that in a second. I don't have that huge of a trade on, but the proper thing to do is to buy a little bit of stock And this way, if the stock continues to blow through 315, my upward strike, I'm making money on the calls that I bought. I'm sorry, let me say that again. I'm making money on the stock that I bought in the aftermarket. It's very important if you're trading options. I always say this: if you're trading options and you don't know how to delta hedge, or you don't know how to do these hedgings in the aftermarkets, in my opinion, you really shouldn't be trading options. But that's people do what they want to do, obviously. But same thing, like we did a trade in, I did a UNH trade in options that worked pretty well, and it spiked right before the open, so I didn't have to do anything. But if I saw, if I was in a, which we saw UNH yesterday, if that had rallied really hard, about a half hour before the open, what I would have been doing is selling stock to lock in the gains on my calls. Again, it's like option hedging 101. Very important you know how to do that, and I'm just going to say it now. If you're trading options, especially around earnings season, and you don't know how to delta hedge, meaning sell stock versus your long option position, you should really figure out how to do that. It is essential in regards to trading after hours. So anyway, you can by all means, we go over these things in the trading room when needed. But I always encounter people who are like, "No, I have no idea how to do that." It's like, well, you probably shouldn't be trading. Honestly, if you don't know the mechanics underneath how options work, and again, this is not. That's why I said 101. It's not that difficult. But in any event, it's a good exercise to learn. Because what happens, and the reason why is because sometimes they start their earnings call, and like, so let's say that you were outright long, like the 295 call in Netflix, right? You have a nice profit on your hands, but if you don't know how to delta hedge, you have to wait all the way to the open, and hope that the market maker lets you out, that the options aren't that wide. Meanwhile, what you could do is, I was going to say Netflix and chill, but that's a bad joke. But what you could do, even before the earnings call starts, because sometimes the earning call starts and the stock gives it all back. Uh, you could basically go ahead and lock in some of. You don't have to do it for the whole portion of your calls, but you sell stock and you could rest easy at night. It's a very simple exercise, but you do have to know what the delta ratio is, and be able to kind of convert your option position into shares. So anyway, let's move on. Just again looking at a couple other names that are reported, like I see CSX, which is up right now. So again, just tells me that right now the expectations are a little low. Maybe that will change as we get a little bit deeper into earnings season, but I gave an example of just what again, I think there's so many people on Twitter who don't tell you what they're trading. They'll tell you afterwards. Like you'll probably see some victory laps for Netflix later, but nobody told you what their position was. People just don't really uh, uh, reveal what their position is until after the fact. I try to be as transparent. I'm obviously running a trading room, so I can't put every trade that I'm in because it's not fair to the people who pay for the service. But I try to put out there, exactly. What I'm doing in many situations, and my thoughts on the market. The major thing that I think is important is with this market trying to push to the upside. All right. I mean, today was basically, why I'm not going over what the market did today is because basically it did nothing, right? All the option activity and so forth that people tweet out all day long. The market, for the whole market. Now there's some decent individual movers, but we basically closed right where we started the day. It was again seems to be we get these days almost like every other day. It's basically a nothing day. We didn't move at all. So that's why I'm not going over major market moves. But if we go to the daily chart and the S&P, we are pushing. We are working off a bullish MACD crossover now. So we could definitely, and I think the market always seems to do what people are not expecting, and people are probably not expecting for the S&P to break out during earnings season. Usually it's a pretty choppy time of the year as more and more results come out. But I think that the market will try to do that from time to time. But no one has a crystal ball, right? I go back to what I was saying last night. Could this be the beginning of an actual trend where we break out, or will we have more chop, sideways action? Uh, I don't. Of course, no one knows the answer to this. But you kind of set up for what the best risk to reward situation is. So what I did yet on Monday. Again, we didn't do a video. Oh no, I'm sorry. Today's Wednesday, so I did, take a lot of profits in some option positions yesterday. It was a great day when we have one of these big green days to kind of even get rid of some of your unprofitable positions and kind of be a little bit slimmer for earnings season, and be this way I can kind of pivot a little bit easier without being weighed down by too many option positions. I think that's key right now. However, I do want some exposure. So one of the things that I did yesterday was I bought which again, this had an inside day today, so you could actually get into this for a little bit cheaper. But if this group continues to rally, called the Internet Names, what I did was I purchased some FDN calls. I think this has a good risk to reward situation on it in case some of the other FANG names do what Netflix is doing right now in the aftermarket. And that's the whole name of the game. It's really risk to reward, considering that even though some of these people on Twitter will try to tell you that they think they know what's going to happen, no one really knows what's going to happen. So the best you can kind of do is trade off of the best risk to reward situations. So a lot of option flow today that is kind of centered around earnings. And again, I'm not really sure if they're doing a little bit of pre-positioning. We had a couple questions. There's a couple trades that hit the tape today, and someone said, "Hey, that's a pretty good looking trade, for earnings." It could be. You just don't know, especially when they purchase far out of the money calls. Go to my option activity channel. We do have an earnings channel that we put in on our earnings channel. This is my this one didn't really work today. The other one that I had, the UNH trade, worked really well from the other day. But you don't know if when somebody buys out of the money options on the calls or the put side, right? In this case, the stock that I'm talking about saw calls, but you don't know if somebody's hedging. This particular name is in a downtrend. You don't know if somebody's hedging their short position. People normally, there is some speculation, just like we see on the tape with when there's not earnings that are coming up in a couple weeks, but there's a lot of hedging that takes place with options as well. People are hedging their short positions by buying calls, and people are, and vice versa. Sometimes they're buying puts to hedge their long position. So anyway, so what else happened today? I'll kind of move on from that, and we'll wrap up the video and make today's video a little bit shorter than usual. We might continue to see this, a little bit of rotation. I'm scheduled to be on Bloomberg TV tomorrow, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But I'll tell you, one group that remains really strong is this home builders. I always like to give a couple trade ideas, but look at this home builders. There is a VPOC coming up here, so this may be where this ITB is going, up to 45. That would be a place if you're long to take some profits. The name that I'm long, which is finally starting to work, I've been holding this probably for like 2 weeks now, is this TPH trade. It is now breaking outside of value. So I think this going up to 17, and again, I've talked about this name before, but it is now starting to catch some momentum finally. The name is up to 1550, so again, nice looking move in TPH. So that's one name that this kind of feels like a catch up name to the rest of the group, because certainly names like DHI have been just absolutely on fire. A few other names or a few other groups. So software, of course, it's funny how this thing happens. But Workday had their analyst day yesterday, which did not go well, and the stock was down on that one. And then ServiceNow and Adobe get downgraded by two different brokers, sent the whole group down. So what do I look for when we see that? I look for names that are best in breed. And of course, I look for call activity too. But I'm looking at this Coupa software down 9%. no company specific news, just down in sympathy. Best in breed name. One thing that so I played this for a bounce for a day trade. I made a little bit of money in it. The one thing I would be concerned about, even though this is best in breed, it could get down to 132. That would be a place where I would really be a big buyer. Down at 132. But keep in mind, it's far down there, right? These things, I do think the version point of controls have some magnetic force to them, but it's still far away from this. So it could definitely see a bounce back up here. If it gets closer, like if it starts to head down to 136, 135, then I would say, for me, I would be waiting for this VPOC to be taken out, this version point of control to be taken out. But if it sticks around here, I don't think you don't have to worry about it right this second. But Koopa is one name that I think is best in breed in the group, and falling. It's amazing how quickly these things fall, falling 9%. So if you like this name and if you like it for the longer term, you're getting an opportunity on something like that. Other areas of the market that were performed pretty well today: the transports, and some of the internet names, also Chinese internet names, performed well. Also, some of the other momentum names, like the solar names, were down today as well. They seem to kind of fall a little bit with that group. The semiconductors also took a breather today, which I think is perfectly fine as well. All right, guys. So we'll see. It'll be kind of a day-by-day situation. What I was saying earlier was there was a lot of opportunities to scalp today, even though the overall market was flat. Here's my trade blotter for today. Like I said, I made some money trading Coop. Okta was another one, very in and out of these pretty quickly. Boeing was also a nice scalp for the day. Notice what Boeing did today up to that VPOC. I was astounded that it actually went further than that, but notice it gave it all back. So I'm not sure what that's about, but nevertheless, I played this. I sold it here. I did not. Maybe I should have hold on to the last piece there. But in any event, all right. Well, that's today's video. And again, I think with now that we're deep into earnings season, I think you just basically have to take it day by day. Watch your positioning. I think it makes sense to have some positioning and some calls that if you think we could see something kind of crazy happen, like a nice earnings move by Netflix, where you're going to profit on those. But again, that's what the beauty of options is that you could take a shot, and if it doesn't work, you only lose the premium. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.